All right. Well, with that, perhaps we can get started. Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Your Own Corner of the Internet with Hello Registry. I'm Adam Eisner. I'm the Vice President of .ca and Registry at CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. With me is Trevor Bowden, who is co-founder of Big Room Inc. and the operator of the .eco TLD. And Pim Pastoors, a product manager at SIDN, the operator of the .nl registry. And we'll get into it a little bit, but for those who don't know, Hello Registry is a collaboration between CIRA and SIDN, and we'll get a little more into that later on in this webinar. So here's how the webinar will look. Fairly straightforward. We'll talk a little bit about round two and new TLDs. Then we'll get into .eco and what .eco learned through their experience in round one. And there are lots of awesome learnings to cover in there. We will talk a little bit about round two for new gTLDs and the process that will entail. And then a bit on Hello Registry and how it can help support your efforts in the round two process. Then we'll wrap it up, but not before we have questions and answers. So we're going to make sure that we leave a good amount of time for Q&A. So if you do have any questions while we're going through this, please feel free to either throw them into the chat where we have some team members keeping an eye on things, or you can also throw them into the question and answer feature here in Zoom. And we'll get to those at the end as well. Post-webinar, the materials will all be made available, so we'll be sharing those out as well once we wrap up the webinar. So a little bit by way of introduction for round two of new TLDs. I suspect that a lot of participants on this call already know the ins and outs and the basics of what the round two process will look like, with the window for new TLD applications in round two opening April 30th. There will be several months in which applicants will have the opportunity to apply for their new TLD, their top level string. Hello Registry was one of the first approved backend providers in this round two process. Hello Registry has quite a bit of experience from the round one process, so we are lucky enough to have Trevor and .eco talking about his experience today, but have other round one strings on the platform as well. So .polizzi, .kiwi, .blog, others. And so really a wide range of experience from round one that we'll be carrying into round two as the window opens in April and carries on through the summer. And we'll talk a little bit more. Pim's going to walk us through exactly what that process means and exactly what that means for your application and some of the learnings that we have from previous experience and how that might impact the process in round two. So with that, oh, right, the survey. I don't know. we had a slide in here somewhere for the survey, but perhaps I skipped over it. So before we get to Trevor, let's take a second here. We did want to take a moment to take a look at who is on this webinar and what the cross section of attendees kind of look like. So if you could give it a moment, what do you know about the world of TLDs and what are you hoping from this webinar? We'll give it a moment here just to fill out a little bit of information so that we get to learn a little bit more about who's on the call today. Now, as a point of order, I am not 100% sure how we actually, there we go. All right, so getting some information here. We have people that are in the know that have questions and people that have TLDs that are curious about this round. And so this is good in the sense that we will get lots of insight from folks who've participated in this before that'll be able to share their experiences. So with that, perhaps this is a good time to introduce Trevor and throw it over to you, Trevor, to talk a little bit more about .eco, your experiences from round one.
That's great, Adam. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you today. And thank you very much to CIRA and SIDN for inviting me. I'm happy to share some of our experiences in applying for .eco in the 2012 round, which I appreciate is quite some time ago. And I hope those insights are useful to you. I'm going to briefly cover a little bit about .eco, the application process as it looked from our perspective going through the process, and finally some lessons and takeaways. Now, based on the poll that Adam just ran, I think some of you have some experience in previous rounds, so I'd be interested to hear how this meshes with your previous experience, and I'll share what it looked like from our side. So in the 2012 round, there was a community application track, as there is in this round, and we decided that that was the most logical track for our community. It was the best way to represent and protect their interests. And so we worked with the community directly to develop the policies and principles that would govern .eco and how we would steward it. Ultimately, we were one of the only extensions to pass the community threshold that was established in the application process, something that we in the community were very proud of. I'll give you a couple quick facts about .eco before we get into some more of the history. We do have an eligibility requirement. We wanted to reflect the community's interest in transparency. And so we asked people to share their sustainability actions and priorities in what we call a .eco profile before they can use their .eco domain. This all happens post-registration, so it's very respectful of the existing norms around the registration flow at registrars and resellers. But it is a way of us fulfilling the eligibility requirements for the extension. We also operate one of the only carbon neutral registries. This is a very important part of our story and a way to demonstrate leadership in the space. And finally, we currently have about 10,000 domains under management and continue to steadily grow. Most of these registrants are small and mid-sized businesses, which interestingly was not necessarily the audience that we thought .eco would apply to when we put the application together. But that's what happens when you release a product to the world. And so we're very happy that our registrants have found a good home in .eco. So let me give you a little bit of history then. So to start with, this is definitely not to scale. For one thing, the pre-2012 stretch would run far off onto the left side of this slide and off the screen. We spent a number of years consulting with the community, socializing the idea, putting the pieces in place to prepare and fund an application. In 2012, we did finally apply, but it wasn't until 2026 that .eco was awarded to us, that it was delegated or added to the internet. And in 2017, we finally launched. I won't go into all the gory details of our application and how it went through the application process, but I will give you a sense of the general path that we faced. You know, like everything, it started with an idea and a question about how we could build something useful, how we could build something that was additive to the community, that was additive to the internet. So that went from an idea into a business plan and into application development, which was working with the community, as I mentioned, working with other stakeholders, working with partners and others who could help us submit a strong application. Finally, we submitted the application. This was the first milestone for us. This was a big box to check in getting that submitted, and then we waited. We waited on the process, on evaluations, on the community priority review. If you've been through this process before, you'll know that there's waiting in this process. Ultimately, we were successful. We were awarded the right to manage .eco, and the second milestone was achieved. That was still not the end, though. Once we won, the job was to get to market, build our distribution pipeline, to plan, to attend industry events, to do modeling again, build a small team, and really figure out how we were going to get off the start line. And then we waited some more until we were delegated, actually added to the internet. And finally, we achieved that last milestone of actually launching. But really important for anyone who hasn't been through this process before, to recognize that this is just the end of the beginning, as they say. Winning and launching is really just the starting point for getting that extension that you've worked on for so long out into the world, seeing how it performs, seeing if it's behaving the way you expected, seeing if you've really connected with the market that you've identified. So a couple things just to emphasize here. There will be waiting. It is unavoidable, uh, and so you should be prepared for that. There are also lots of unknowns. There are lots of things that can cause delay as part of the process. Unexpected things will come up, and you need to be able to adapt to them. And I'm happy to say that you will be busy throughout the process, in spite of all the waiting. There's lots to do, and you should really keep in mind that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And so plan for that. Use your time wisely, and you'll be in good shape if you're successful in the process. It would be easy to think that this is quite a passive process, but it's not just a waiting game. You could maybe submit your application and just sit back and wait for an answer. But for us, at least, it was a much more active process. It was a process of keeping the community engaged, keeping our investors on side, planning, building, meeting, all of these things that I've listed here. And all of these things, as many of you will know, continue well past the application process. Uh, they are part and parcel of operating a top-level domain. So it's definitely not a set it and forget it type situation. If you've reviewed the applicant guidebook, you will know that this is a structured process. It has very well-defined steps and processes and sub-processes and timelines associated with it. But it is also dynamic. This is a quasi-regulatory environment. It's got shifting timelines, as I said, things that will come up, things you need to be ready for. So make sure that you're ready for it, make sure that your stakeholders are ready for it, and you'll be well placed to last the application process and get to market. So let's just talk through a couple key lessons before I hand it over again. Um, there will be twists and turns along the way. It might be that there's competition for your extension. It might be that the process is taking longer than expected. As I said, be ready for these. Be ready to adapt to those conditions, and really plan for the long run. Make sure that you can ensure and make sure that you can withstand any delays, for one thing, but also use the time to uh, build relationships that will see you through the next stage of operating the extension if you're successful, and think about that longer horizon. One of the things we found was that innovation in this space is hard. So do keep in mind that this is an established industry. It has lots of its own norms and processes and economics and constraints. But there is space for innovation. Just do your homework ahead of time. Be aware of how the market works. Be aware of how your extension is going to fit into that market. And the last thing I'll say is it can be lonely out there, quite frankly, especially if you're not already familiar with the industry. It really helps to have trusted, aligned partners to work with and to learn from through the process. One of the biggest decisions that you're going to be making is in selecting your registry service provider. They will be your answer to one of the most common questions, especially from registrars, which is who is your back end? So you want to make sure that you have a good answer to that you have selected a partner who is aligned with your goals, who has taken the time to understand your business, who is experienced, who's done this for other TLDs, and is well respected in the space, and ideally someone who's actively developing the platform. The technology in the space continues to evolve. The norms continue to evolve. New products are being released that the registry service provider needs to accommodate or integrate into its platform. You want somebody who's working to continually develop the infrastructure that you're operating your TLD on. They really are your front door for all of those commercial relationships that you have with your retailers. So that is everything that I have to share with you today in a few short minutes. Happy to answer any questions as we get further on. And with that, I will hand it back to the CIRA and SIDN team.
Thanks, Trevor. That was fantastic. And again, to Trevor's point, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A section here as we go forward. Next, we'll move it over to Pim, who will talk a little bit about what does the next round actually look like. Pim?
Yeah, I will touch briefly on the total process, the planning, types of TLDs, go a bit deeper on budget, and also what to expect when you start answering those questions. On the screen, you also see the website of ICANN, and looking at the participants, I think a lot of you will be familiar with it, but on that site, you can also directly find information from ICANN itself. There are a few major milestones for the next round coming up. The first one is April 30, and then TAMS will open, or actually the system of ICANN that allows you to start filling in your application to get access to your TLD. And depending on the type of TLD you choose, you have to respond to 225 questions. Some of those will be easy, but some of those will be hard. To give you an example, SIDN is a Dutch corporation, and we also had the TAM system for our Registry Service Provider services to be validated. And one of the questions we got was proof that you pay your taxes, which sounds logical and easy. And when you're an American company, you can go to the tax agency and get a paper or report saying you paid your taxes. When you would ask the Dutch government such questions, it would be very quiet because you would not get any response. So the challenge we faced is, how do you solve that issue? And luckily we were not the first Dutch company trying to do business with an American entity. So there were ways to answer that, but to be honest, it took a few weeks to kind of figure out how to solve that and then to arrange the documents to get it up and running. One of the other things we faced, and you again may face this if you're not a native English speaking, we had to provide some English documents. And while I'm speaking English to you today, I was not allowed to translate those documents. We got it back. It had to be translated by someone who was sworn in by court, who was a native English speaker. And I'm natively Dutch, so that was a kind of tricky issue. Again, there are all ways around that, and we got it done. But also this thing cost us an additional 2 weeks to find out how to fix that and get the right documents in place. So when you want to go for your own TLD, my advice before we go any further is start early, because there will be a few tricky questions, which at least I did not expect. I did expect a lot of difficult questions about our platform, not about legal stuff like taxes. But when the window opens, it will open for a while. Another really big milestone will be Reveal Day. On Reveal Day, ICANN will publish all the strings that are applied for, but also the backup strings. And that's different than the previous rounds. So in the previous round, when Trevor went for .eco and I would do the same thing, we would be in contention. But now I have the option to add an alternative, for example, .environmentally or something like that. And when on Reveal Day, I would see I have the same string as Trevor or someone else, I could replace it. And that's where the string replacement period comes in. So there is a period where you can choose to change your string to your alternative to prevent that you come into competition with someone else who wants the same one. And after that, you have string confirmation, and then things really start kicking in. So, and those are the 4 milestones before actually the process starts. And when I go to my next slide, this is a planning that I can share. You see actually the process a bit more in detail. So on 30th April, TAMS opens. It will close on August 12th. which will give you 104 days to fill in your application. And again, that sounds like a lot of time. It is a lot of time, but some questions will be hard. And ICANN may ask you for some feedback or additional information, and you would like to have those times to really answer those questions. Then somewhere in October will be reveal day. They haven't announced a date yet. The rumor is it will be before or after the annual general meeting, not during. We will see what happens. I personally think that it's depending on the number of applicants that will be there. So when there will be a lot of subscriptions or applicants, ICANN will likely want to have a bit more time to review them. And then all the other days are actually adding up on that. So when reveal day is the end of October, then string confirmation day will probably be the end of November, and they will collide. And then priority drawing is also a very important one. The applications will be reviewed based on batches. The first batch contains 700 strings. So you really would like to have a low number in your priority drawing, because then you'll be in the first batch. But you can also be later on in the process. Now, I can predict that you will be able to get your string within 1.5 years. We just heard Trevor's story. I hope people will get their string in 1.5 years, but I would not be surprised if it would take a lot more time and even a lot more years for some of those. But yeah, we'll just have to wait when they start in their process reviewing everything. An important step when you apply is to think about what TLD will I go through. And based on the type of TLDs, you have other requirements of ICANN, but also other questions to answer. So the first is the generic, actually the gTLD, which we all know. It's the open one. It has no special requirements unless it's open. That's the major one. The other one is the community, like eco. And community has some additional requirements which you have to answer to get it approved, but also allows you to put some restrictions on your TLD. And it's based on your community, which you select the restrictions that you applied for your TLD. Then we have the geographical name, for example, .Amsterdam or .Berlin. Those represent a region. And for those, you have to have proof that the local government or local regions does not object you to apply for your TLD. And it will be validated. And again, after that, it can be open or it can be closed, that you say, I would only want the people in that specific region apply for a domain name or not. Another option you have is a brand TLD. And a brand TLD, yeah, the name itself says it a bit, is you have to have the brand to apply for brand TLD. But when you get that TLD, you have the option to close your TLD down. And that's where it changes from, for example, a generic. A brand like .philips or .kpn registers its own domain names for its own brand. Another type is IDN. When you're a non-ASCII, it's especially very popular in Asia. And then you can get your dot in your own local language, which is not English. You have the options to apply for an IDN name on an existing gTLD. So here you see .shop, but it could be .shop but done in Japanese or Chinese. And you can also go for an IDN but with some variants. So some words mean the same thing in a specific dialect, for example, in Japanese or Chinese. And then you have the option to apply up to 4 variants to your TLD. You can go for a government or IGO TLD where you say it's mine. And we have the applicant support program that's actually providing you some financial support from ICANN to apply for your TLD. If you want to go for the applicant support, you either have it or you're too late because the window of that closed. And these options really differ than the previous round, because when the previous round started, there was only one. You just applied for your TLD. And when the round started, or when you start looking at the applications, they kind of added things like the brand TLD. And I hope at least that this also means that the process is more clear, and ICANN will also be able to finish the process a bit faster than it did in the previous round. It's good to know, based on the type of TLD you choose, you get some different kind of questions you need to answer. And then I come to the next part, and that's fees. And there are a lot of fees, but for your business plan, it's important to know. And the majority of the people all look at the $227,000. And that's the most important fee. But it's not the only fee you'll get from ICANN. So one of the fees, and that's not really open to arrows, it's the trademark clearinghouse fee. So if you have looked at the new registry agreement, so the new contract, which you will sign when you get your TLD, in the fine letters, you will read that when you go live, and you go live openly, you will have to have a sunrise. And in that sunrise, brands have a previous opportunity to register domain names. And the trademark clearinghouse is kind of the system that makes that work. And you have to pay for that. So that's 5,000 euros, dollars, which will pop up to your fee, which you have to pay to go live. And then there is a lot of fees based actually on the type of TLD that you choose. So when you go for a brand TLD, you have to share your brand registration with ICANN, and they will validate if you really have your brand. It will cost you $500. Then you have the code of conduct exceptions, which give you some additional freedom. Applying for that will cost you $400. Then you have the community priority evaluation, and this is a range because it depends a bit on your application. It's somewhere between 50 and 80,000 euros. The geographical names review, so if you want to apply for a geo, it's lower than 12K, and it's a bit odd if you look at the other ones, but there was some feedback from the gTLD group to ICANN that if you want to apply for a geo, you have to pay $12,000, while if you apply for a brand, it's 500 euros. And they ended up giving to the gTLD or actually to the community that it will be $12,000 or lower, depending on the RFP they're running. So they're currently looking for a supplier, and they hope they can do it for less than $12,000. But let's see, the RFP is still running. We have name collision. So if you apply for TLD, one of the processes is that we check, or ICANN checks in the DNS, if there is some traffic on the TLD, for example, on .local or .home or anything. And when there is, ICANN wants you to have a mitigation plan. And then the bill starts really kicking because it's between $100,000 and $150,000. And we have registry commitments. You can add some additional commitments. For example, if the GAC, so the governments in ICANN who reviewed your application have some concerns, you can add some commitments to ensure them that you're doing an okay job. But again, you will have to pay for that. So a lot of fees who kind of could kick up and make your investment into ICANN a lot more expensive. And these are the fees you have to pay to start. When you go live, you also have some fees. ICANN wants you to pay almost $27,000 when you're live. And also when you go above the 50,000 domain names, you have to pay a quarter per domain name a year. And if you look at the previous round, the majority of the strings or TLDs didn't come above the 30,000 domain names. So the price per domain name depends a bit on your model if you have to pay that, but you always have to pay the annual fee. That's for the ICANN fees. You also have some additional fees, like us. So you need a registry backend operator. And yeah, we try to be competitive, but we're not free. You have to have a consultancy, or at least if you're really familiar with the industry, you could write your own applicant guidebook answer for your string. But I would assume that the majority of you would get some guidance or advice from a consultancy firm. And then I think the major budget you need, and sometimes this is forgotten a lot of questions, is marketing budget to launch your TLD. And depending on the target audience you're aiming for, this can be a lot. So if you're aiming for a city like Amsterdam, it's relatively easy to launch your TLD and to think about marketing plan. But if you go for a global generic TLD, you have to figure out a global marketing plan. And that by definition is meaning a lot of dollars if you go for globally. But it's part of your launch. If you want to be successful, you have to think about how do you do that. And then we have the escrow fees. And that's something we can arrange for you. but it's a fee. And if it could be part of our bill, it could be something you sign separately. But ICANN demands you to have an escrow provider with the sole purpose that if we or you are not able to deliver the service in the way that ICANN wants, that they can start the emergency backup registry operator to take over your TLD and run it for a while. Because this is critical infrastructure, you do want to make sure it's safe. Although I don't expect any issues with us, it's a requirement you have to fulfill if you apply for your TLD. So to sum it a bit up, you have to start with the applicant guidebook with a lot of questions. And I started with 225 questions, but 150 are about your legal entity. So the majority is not really about what your application is about. It's more about who are you? Are you a safe company? Are you a safe person? Because they will do a background check on your company, but also on you. And you will have to finish that before you can start actually filling in the applications. And again, when we studied our RSP, it took ICANN a month to validate SIDN. And to be honest, I don't know what they checked. We got passed, but they didn't share any feedback they got from our board members. But I did have to fill in their names, their birthdays and everything so that they could do a background check on our board members to make sure they're legitimate. Luckily, they were. But you need to answer that and to pass that before you can start filling in. Then you have your type of TLD, and the type of TLD really determines the questions you will get. The registry operator. I hope you choose us, but you're obviously open to choose anyone you want as long as they've been pre-approved by ICANN. You could try to do it yourself. I would not encourage you to do it. Please select one from ICANN. They approved. And then you have to make your financial projections. And I touched a few costs you have while applying for your TLD. But of course, you will also have other costs like staff and people who you need to run your organization. But when you fill in your applicant guidebook, ICANN wants you to have some scenarios, a positive, a negative, and a neutral. And you have to work on that. And I think the advantage from this round compared to the previous round is we have some real numbers. You can just look online and see what strings like eco did and try to use that to predict what your string might do to work on your financial plan. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam again.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pim. That was a really good look at, we already have an early indication in round two about what kind of welts we can expect through an application process with ICANN. So definitely really helpful information. So this is the last bit of the webinar, excuse me, and we'll just talk for a couple of minutes about how Hello Registry could hypothetically support an applicant. Trevor and Pim have both touched a little upon what Hello Registry can do and why it can be a great partner. One of the things that not everybody is aware of is Hello Registry is a one-of-a-kind partnership between CIRA and SIDN, where two like-minded registry operators, one operating .ca, one operating .nl, two of the world's biggest ccTLDs and other gTLDs and ccTLDs with them, have come together to create a community-minded registry. So we really do think about the strings that use the Hello Registry platform as a community, and we'll talk a little bit more about why as I click along. And if I think about some of the headline pieces of information around it, certainly between all of the TLDs, there's more than 12 million domains under management by the platform. It is by TLDs for TLDs. So with two major ccTLD operators coming together, you get some definite true expertise from operators of two of the biggest extensions out there. And that extends itself into the service that's provided to other strings. It's very boutique, it's very personalized, and it's by companies that already understand what the challenges of operating a string are. Flexible deployment models, whether it's in the cloud, it's on local hardware, you're operating it on your own infrastructure or having Hello Registry operate it. There's a wide range of configurations and environments. And perhaps the biggest thing is the Hello Registry platform has patented features that are really designed to help registries grow their business. And so we often hear, I can't believe we can do this on our own. Whereas with other providers, we would have had to send in a request to change something or modify a life cycle or glean some important information to help me turbocharge my sales or management of premium names or what have you. The design of Hello Registry is such that there's patented features in there that can help accelerate your business without any extra work in the platform required. And so I mentioned the word community, and so we really do feel like as operators with very similar challenges in very similar universes, that if we can share our expertise together, we are stronger together. And so every year at an ICANN meeting, all of the different extensions that use Hello Registry get together and share ideas, share roadmap input, listen to and glean information from various departments inside of the Hello Registry organization to really talk about where the business is going, where the platform should go as a result. And it's really rewarding to watch a major ccTLD in one corner of a room talk perhaps to a smaller gTLD in the room, and they'll just share ideas and information and expertise on what they're seeing in the market. And so it really provides a little bit of a different look and a little bit of a different operating model than what other registry platforms out there typically experience. And so we could talk ad nauseum about how Hello Registry ticks all the regular boxes, but we don't feel like that is the strongest suit. Certainly, it is important to know that whether it is ISO certification or 24/7 support or fully ICANN compliant, these are all table stakes to offer a modern registry platform today. Certainly, as operators of CA and NL, and as in a bureau provider that CIRA is, and as the DNS Anycast operator for 1/3 of all TLDs worldwide, we do believe that on top of all of the checkboxes that you need for a platform provider, there's an extra level of critical infrastructure service there that is taken very seriously because of where SIDN and CIRA sit in the market. And so Trevor touched on this a little, but one of the things that we're very proud of is the constant innovation in the platform. So we have monthly releases and very low technical debt. We have very consistent operational ownership. And so one thing that is interesting to note is if you look at the landscape from round 1 to round 2, lots of different platforms and organizations have changed hands. But as two not-for-profits that are governed in a specific way, it would be very difficult for Hello Registry's principals to suddenly change their structure or exit the business. And so we have been and will be here for the long haul. We have personalized boutique service. So when you're operating your string, you are learning and you are interacting with people at both SIDN and CIRA who have deep expertise managing large ccTLDs through channels of very extensive registrars. And I mentioned the patented features, which most of which is encompassed under a set of functionality called tags. You know, we like to say, if you can think it, you can tag it. There are hundreds of different use cases for using our tag system, which allow registries to grow their business in any number of different ways, from tracking the performance of a subset of names to introducing different business logic for specific sets of names and everything in the middle. It really is a very extensive suite of features. And again, critical operators that understand what it's like to operate critical infrastructure, as operating important infrastructure for Canada or for the Netherlands, or supporting a wide range of different TLDs underneath. We certainly understand what it takes to operate something that needs to be safe, stable, secure, and very responsive 100% of the time. And so with that, perhaps we'll give it a minute to compile any questions. You can either use the chat or use the Q&A function in Zoom to do that. And we'll see what comes in and if there's anything to go on from there. So feel free to submit any questions that you have now. maybe in the meantime, Trevor, I'll ask you one completely unscripted because we actually didn't go over this at all. But I would be interested. You were talking a little bit about a pivot when you were submitting your application to what you actually launched with and how things had actually changed a little bit. What did that mean operationally for you, or did that change anything about how you intended to operate?
I think one of the things that we had to accommodate was just continued changes in timing. And so it meant uh, reevaluating some of our plans. It meant uh, finding different ways to use the time. And because we launched a fair amount of time after what I would call the herd of other extensions, it meant that we were stepping into a very different market. We were a couple of years after many of the other extensions had launched. And so it was a more mature market at that time. Registrars were um, more careful about the extensions that they were onboarding. And in general, it was just a more a more deliberative time that we were entering into, as opposed to some of the froth and excitement as all of the rest of the TLDs launched. But that was really a positive for us. I mean, it gave us the opportunity to really look at how some other TLDs were performing, what was going on in the market, what was working, what was not, and helped us craft a story about how .eco could really appeal to our community, could land with the registrants that we were hoping to attract, and build a strong foundation and strong partnerships with those registrars by really being mindful of what they were looking for, and what sorts of indicators or metrics would be valuable to them, uh, and reinforcing how .eco met a number of those criteria for them, whether it was in ensuring that we were a trusted space, that we were modeling high renewal rates because of the fact that there were the eligibility requirements, there would be low abuse, um, and that we had a group of applicants who were likely committed to .eco names for the long term. And so uh, you might model going straight out the door, and sometimes you don't. And when you don't, you can see what the landscape looks like and adapt to that.
Yeah, that's great. So I have another question here, but before I get to it, you can also raise your hand and ask your question using a microphone. And so that is also an option as well. I have a question here about replacement string scenarios. Pim, perhaps I will ask you about this one. Um, can you provide any insight into how the replacement string scenario would work? And any sort of insight into whether what happens if there's a contention set?
Um, um, actually, it's um, also a bit of picking your battles. So you would, when you fill in your application, you also have to submit your replacement string. And on reveal day, both will be published. So everyone will see the string you applied for, and everyone will see your replacement string. You will also see the ones of your competitors. Um, and that means when you have that information, you have to kind of figure out what am I going to do. So if no one applies for your original string, you would go for it. That would be my advice. But if there would be a replacement string you want to apply for, you would also very carefully have to look for what are others applying for, because it's for the string and the replacement string. There might be no exact competition, but if I would go for eco or ecos with an S, Trevor would still kind of be offended because, okay, that's very close to my TLD. I don't like that. So then I could still end up in contention. So you don't only have to look at your exact match, but also your alternative. For the string itself, it depends on a bit on what your business model is. So you could, for example, choose to add some additional words to make it more clarifying, but that the challenge is that it also will be a bit longer, and in general, a shorter string is better than a longer string. But you can also use a different word which represents the same thing. So choosing the string you use for a replacement is a very important decision. You can only do it once. And choosing if you go for it is also an important and also a difficult decision, because if you see you might have a contention set regarding replacement strings, you don't know if your competitor will go for their original one or their replacement one. And so it's important to choose it wisely, but also changing it is not a likely decision. You will have to really look at your teams. What are my chances? But also chance of winning at ICANN, but also the impact on your business model, because most likely your string will be very closely tied to the plans you have.
Follow-on question, any advice to structuring your company for the application in your, I was going to say experience, but anything you've learned through even going through the current round 2 work that you've done?
So it has to be an existing one, and don't make it too complicated. So you could create a new legal entity for your string. At least that's in the Netherlands, pretty common situation to create a new legal entity if you have a new business. You have to upload to ICANN all the board members who are there. But if you have a small board in your company, that's fine. But ICANN will ask you if you would be able to deliver all services. So for the SIDN situation, we have the SIDN Foundation, but SIDN Business BV applied for the string. Applied for the RSP test. I can ask the question, the legal entity is pretty slim. Are you able to deliver the service? And we could very easily say, yeah, there is SDN, the .nl registry, who is practically providing all the people and services to run the backend. So it's good to form a new legal entity. It's not a real issue if there's not a lot of staff in that, but you should have proof that you kind of outsourced some of your work to us or to someone else, because ICANN will ask you how are you able to run every critical function that a normal company has.
Great. This next one, maybe I'll ask both of you. Pim, I'll start with you. You mentioned that marketing costs can be quite high for a TLD. Can you share any examples or thoughts of how tagging can be used in sales to help support that? And then Trevor, perhaps a follow-on to that in terms of any examples you might use tags for today in your own environment.
So when you launch a TLD, you first have the branding. People should be aware of you. And what tags can really help is doing what we call co-funded marketing campaigns with registrars. So you can enable registrars to do campaigns with your TLD. So to give an example, in a few weeks in the Netherlands, we will have King's Day, which is a very important day we celebrate, and all the Netherlands will be orange. But it could be a good event to do a co-funded campaign. For example, when a registrar wants to sell something with the word King or William in it, he would get a discount based on selling or upselling a domain name in that specific period. Sorry. And tagging allows you to create a specific marketing campaign, which you can figure out which is logical for your TLD in a specific period, with all of your registrars of a selection of registrars. And the great thing about tagging is you create your marketing plan, you set it or you plan it, but also the registrar will be able to get the real price from the system. So you don't have to do everything in legal documents. You can if you want, but you can just ask our platform what is the current price for this specific domain name, and it will give you the discounted price based on the marketing model you created.
Great. Trevor, is there anything else you would add there?
I think Pim's enumerated most of the reasons there, but just to give a couple practical examples, we use tags extensively for promotions that we're running with registrars. One of the great things about the platform I find is that it's all essentially self-serve. as I believe Adam described. So we can set up a promotion using tags for all or a subset of names, identify the registrars who are participating, the duration, set timelines around when the tags are effective. And so this really means that we can do this all in-house quite easily and quite quickly and get retailers enrolled in a promo in a way that's very easy, seamless for them. They can test that pricing. We can set it up in the OT&E environment if they want to test it out first before moving it into production. And so it gives us a lot of flexibility. It doesn't mean contacting the Hello team about enabling anything for us or anything like that. So that's really useful. The other way that we use tags is around premium names. And so we use it for tagging the pricing tiers that we have for premium names. We can then move names between those tags. We can add multiple tags to names if we want to add additional metadata to those names. Could be categories or groups that's useful for refining the list, the portfolio of premium names that we manage. And so there's really a lot of flexibility and the ability to apply that flexibility ourselves, which we found has been very useful and helpful.
Great. As a reminder, you can submit a question through Q&A, chat, or raise your hand. This next one is, well, this could be for both of you. I guess, Trevor, I'll start with you. Biggest pitfalls for first-time applicants that you saw in your experience?
Biggest pitfalls. Oh, how much time have we got?
Yeah, well, maybe the biggest pitfall.
I mean, there are a lot of potential pitfalls, but I think you have to go into the process um, hoping for the best and expecting the worst. I mean, you have to be prepared for any scenario. You have to be prepared for string contention. You have to be prepared for objections that may crop up. You have to be prepared for delays in the process. And so I think a pitfall is certainly for a first-time applicant would be coming into this and thinking that you're going to be out the door in 12 months or 18 months or something like this. And um, and submitting your application and sitting back. I don't think that that's a good strategy. I wouldn't recommend it. And I think that you'd be well served by thinking for the long term. Um, Ultimately, a lot of this business is about identifying risk, managing risk, being a stable operator. And so you can demonstrate that in a lot of your planning right up front. And so uh, plan for it, make sure your stakeholders are aware of what the path could look like, and just go into it eyes wide open.
Tim, you want to add anything to that?
I think that Trevor touched most of the points. So you got to prepare for the long run and maybe also prepare for that ICANN is not a regular supplier. So a lot of discussions
That's
I had with
interesting.
people was that they see ICANN as an American company. It's like Google or Microsoft, and I can negotiate with them. It's not. It's an multi-stakeholder internet organization, which is one of a kind. But also, to give an example on where you don't have the option to negotiate, when they want to have a new contract, what we call the registry agreement, it will be put up to vote. And when some number of majorities are hit, it will be legally binding. So there will be no ICANN reaching out to you and negotiating about legal terms, which you normally would do with your supplier. They will just tell you, okay, we did a vote, and I don't know the numbers correctly, but it's something in the 90%, so it's pretty high. The majority voted for approving this, so you now have a new contract. And there are some new legislations in it, and you have to comply with it. And there was some debate within the ICANN community, but it will bring you some cost, and you'll have to pay for it. So that's, I think, be aware that it's not a normal buying something, but it's also you'll have limited influence on your contract. That doesn't mean it will totally change overnight. It will be smooth and you will see it coming. but you can end up in a new contract which you didn't think about when you started doing this.
That is a pickle. This one is a bit of a follow-on, but also perhaps a little tricky. So your view, if submitting multiple applications, would it be easier to use one company or a company per TLD?
So it really depends on the business model you have per TLD. So there could be a reason from risk models, or maybe if you for funding needs additional shareholders that you want to have separate legal entities. But if you look at from the ICANN approach and the process of applying for your TLD, I would encourage you to go for one, because the 150 questions you have to answer for your legal entity, you then only have to answer once, and ICANN will do one background check. And then you can submit all your questions per TLD, and you have the option to add more TLDs to your one application in TAMS. It would just make the process a lot easier from ICANN's point of view. But again, there could be reasons why you want to have more legal entities, depending on your business model. But if you only look at the ICANN application period, I would suggest use one legal entity because it would make the process a lot easier.
Okay, great. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour, and I don't believe we have any more questions. So perhaps we'll take a moment to wrap it up here. Pim and Trevor, I'd like to thank you very much for participating today. That was great. Thanks to the Hello Registry team for helping to organize all of this and to make things run smoothly, which is a lot more work than it looks like. And thanks to everybody for attending today. Again, actually, is there one more? There we go. There is one more slide on getting in touch if you are interested in reaching out after this. Like I said off the top, we'll also make recordings of this available to everybody afterward, and stay tuned for our next webinar when we start to talk about the legal aspects of round 2. So thanks again for everybody for participating and attending today, and have a great day.